Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this week's episode of Law Chat with John and Amy. I'm John Yulian.
And I'm Amy Polianthico. This week's question is, should I have a prenuptial agreement? You want to explain what a prenup is to everyone?
Sure. A prenuptial agreement is a written agreement entered into between two spouses prior to their marriage. And it specifies what is to happen with their existing assets in case of a divorce. Um, the law the laws regarding prenuptial agreements vary from state to state, so you need to check with the attorney in your state to see specifically what is required. But in Massachusetts, for a valid prenuptial agreement, there needs to be full disclosure of assets prior to the execution of the agreement, and each party must be free from undue influence and coercion. So keep in mind, if someone doesn't fully disclose all their assets, the prenuptial agreement will be invalidated. If someone is presented a prenuptial agreement 5 hours before the wedding, once again, the prenuptial agreement is likely to be invalidated because of coercion or undue influence. So there's a number of variables that go into a prenuptial agreement, and it is critical to make sure any prenuptial agreement you enter is going to be valid under the laws of Massachusetts.
So one of the thing I guess people ask me all the time is what can you include in a prenup? And I guess the more important part is what doesn't get included. You want to explain how child support and custody play into that?
Sure, that's a great point, Amy. Just to be clear, someone can't put in a prenuptial agreement that if and when we have children, this is going to be the amount of child support that is going to get paid going forward. So that's not an area that can be covered um, in a prenuptial agreement. We're not getting into it, but there's also a thing called a postnuptial agreement, which deals with um, someone reaching an agreement on how assets are going to be divided in case of a divorce for people who are already married for some period of time. But I want to be clear, a prenuptial agreement is something entered before the marriage. And once again, there are certain things you can't cover, such as you just pointed out, child support cannot be included or put in there, or it's not, if it is, it's just not going to be recognized and upheld by the courts. Amy, if someone's trying to figure out if it's a good idea or not a good idea to have a prenuptial agreement, which is the right answer?
So there really isn't one. There are certain situations where people tend to be more likely to have a prenup. And so those situations are maybe you're getting married older, so you have more assets that you're bringing into the marriage with you, so you want to protect. Or another time is if you both parties have been previously married, so they want to retain certain things. Maybe in your prior marriage, your pension already got split once. You don't want to make sure in your new one you're not splitting it again. Something like that. Are the people we see who tend to be more likely to have a prenup, or if you're maybe inheriting a large amount, you're going to inherit, you have a trust fund, that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be for the super wealthy. Maybe you're getting married at 35 and you already own a house, but you're a teacher or a regular like middle class person. You want to protect that asset in case you get divorced. You want to protect the down payment. If you don't have one and you've been married for 10 years, you could have to split a portion of an asset. So there's not really a right or wrong answer. In prenups, I think people think if I'm getting a prenup, that means I don't think my marriage is going to last. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think I have a will because this is a possibility that I'm going to die any given day. So I want to plan
To
for
say
it.
this, Amy, I think there's a good possibility, as sad as it makes me, that may happen one day.
Well, I mean, I'm
Yes.
saying I'm not waiting till I'm 80 to do it. It's a pre-planning measure, and that is essentially what a prenup is. It's essentially, in a lot of ways, like an insurance policy to protect certain things in case your marriage ends in divorce. Um, and I will say, I'm just going to say, people say 50% of marriages end in divorce. In Massachusetts, 11% of marriages end in divorce. So it's not like, it's a 50-50 chance you're going to use your prenup. But generally, if you end up getting divorced, most people wish they had one. And so I just maybe give you an example. We had a client whose fiance had a history of drug use. They were sober at the time that they were getting married, but because of that, our client was very well off. She had a really great income. She had prior assets, and she was concerned. And so we did a prenup for her, and then she ended up getting divorced about 5 years later, mostly because the husband relapsed and the drug use became problematic. And she was able to retain all of the assets that she brought into the marriage, which she might not necessarily have been able to do if she didn't have the prenup. So in certain situations, they're really, really helpful.
And I think that's a great example, Amy, in a perfect situation where that prenuptial agreement was critical and ultimately proved beneficial. And just to reiterate, um, there needs to be full disclosure. So if anybody is not looking to disclose their true assets, um, the prenuptial agreement is just not going to fly. There can't be fraud, and as we said, there can't be undue influence or coercion. So
And and I just
everybody needs to think. Oh, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
no, I just want to say, I mean, you can't go to the top law firm in Boston who you're spending $800 an hour drafting your prenup agreements and then give it to your spouse, your fiance, and who doesn't have access to any funds and have them have no ability to look at a lawyer. If you're later on trying to enforce a prenuptial agreement and the judge learns that one person had an attorney and the other person couldn't afford it, that's going to matter in determining if that prenup is valid or not.
No, that's a great point to bring up. It's supposed to be this fair resolution with everybody being fully aware of what's on the table and what's at play. So, in the right circumstances, absolutely something that's worthwhile to have. And for other people, it may not be something that they feel is reasonable or necessary. So, just an overview on a prenuptial agreement and hopefully gives people a better understanding of what it is, and then they can determine whether it's something they should have or not if they're getting married.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining Law Chats with John and Amy. We look forward to chatting with you again next week. If you have a question or comment, feel free to email us at info@ulianlaw.com. Remember that Law Chats with John and Amy is intended as a general reference and considered general advertising, and listeners should check for changes to any applicable laws and consult with an attorney on any legal issue. The information provided does not constitute legal advice, and any thoughts or commentary by the podcasting lawyers is provided as a service to the community and does not constitute solicitation of legal advice. The lawyers in the law firm of Julian & Associates PC make no warranties and disclaim all liabilities for damages resulting from its use. Nothing provided in the podcast should be considered a substitute for advice from counsel. No attorney-client relationship is formed by listening or participating in this podcast, and in the event that the podcast receives emails about the subject matter, no attorney-client relationship is created via the email communication.